Spring is right around the corner, but tonight is a reminder that cold temps aren't done with us just yet. In fact, it's cold enough tonight that your pipes may be at risk. So if you've been thinking about taking that freeze protector off your outdoor faucet, hold off. But when exactly should you remove it? We verify.
It happens every spring. Temperatures start climbing. Homeowners eager to get their yards ready start pulling those insulating covers off their outdoor faucets, sometimes a little too early. And with temperatures all over the place over the last 24 hours, it's a good reminder not to jump the gun on removing your spigot protector. But when is it actually safe to remove the freeze protector from your outdoor faucet? Let's verify. Our sources are rotorooter.com, onetomplumber.com, freezemiser.com, and homesandgardens.com. Here's what we found. Plumbing experts say the biggest thing to watch is the overnight forecast. If temperatures are still dropping to 32 degrees or below, your outdoor faucets could still be at risk. That's because water left inside pipes can freeze, expand, and burst. The experts are clear. Don't rush it. They suggest waiting until daytime highs are consistently above 50 degrees and overnight temperatures are staying above freezing for at least 2 solid weeks before that cover comes off. That's because spring weather, especially in the Tennessee Valley, can still bring surprise cold snaps. And tonight is a perfect example of that. Even after a stretch of above freezing temperatures, tonight we're back below freezing. And even one night below can be enough to cause problems if water is sitting in the line. When you do finally remove it, store it somewhere dry so it stays mold and mildew free and is ready to protect your faucet again next winter. And before you reconnect that garden hose, inspect the faucet and pipe behind it for any cracks or drips that may have developed over the winter. If you ever turn the water on and notice low pressure or water inside your home, that could be a sign a pipe was damaged during a freeze. It's also worth noting that a foam cover is not your only line of defense. Most homes have an interior shutoff valve connected to your outdoor faucet. Shutting that off during cold stretches gives your pipes an extra layer of protection. So we can verify that you should keep that freeze protector until nighttime temperatures are reliably above freezing for at least 2 consecutive weeks. Pull it too soon, and one surprise cold snap could have you with a burst pipe and a costly repair bill.
If you have something you want us to verify, text us at 256-382-2692.
If you've ever seen someone get pulled over and blow into a small handheld device on the side of the road, that is not the test that convicts you in court. And that distinction matters more than most people realize. So which DUI test results can actually be used against you in an Alabama courtroom? Let's verify. Our source is the Alabama Code and the Alabama Department of Forensic Sciences. Here's what we found. Alabama law lays out 3 types of DUI testing, and they are not treated equally. The first is the roadside preliminary breath test. This is the small handheld device an officer uses at the scene. Under Alabama law, this test is used to establish probable cause for an arrest, not to prove guilt in court, because the results are considered to be less reliable. That's where the second type of test comes in, the evidentiary breath test. This is the breathalyzer given at the police station. It's a larger, more precise machine, and unlike a roadside test, this one can be used in court, but only if strict requirements are followed. The officer has to be properly certified to administer the test, the machine must be properly calibrated, and the person being tested has to be observed for at least 20 minutes beforehand. And that observation period is important. It ensures nothing like burping, vomiting, or having anything in the mouth interferes with the results. If any of those steps are skipped, a judge can throw the results out. This brings us the last test, the blood test. This one is considered the most accurate and can also be used in court, but again, only if strict rules were followed. Under Alabama law, the blood must be drawn by a qualified medical professional, such as physician, registered nurse, paramedic, or licensed phlebotomist. From there, the process has to be carefully documented. Every single person who touched that sample from the nurse to the lab has to be accounted for. If that chain of custody is broken, the results can be challenged and may not hold up in court. There is one more thing the law covers. If you refuse to take any of these tests after being arrested, Alabama law says that refusal can be used against you in court too. So we can verify that only the evidentiary breath test and blood test can be used as evidence in a DUI trial, but only if strict legal procedures are followed.
The Decatur Police Department is encrypting all of its radio and dispatch traffic. That means the days of anyone tuning in to Scanner app and listening to police calls in real time are over. But that raises a question a lot of people are asking. Is it legal to decrypt and listen to encrypted police radio in Alabama? We verify.
You've probably seen it before. Someone pulls out their phone, opens an app, and listens in on live police radio traffic. For years, that was easy to access, but now, in Decatur, that's changing. Decatur police are encrypting all radio and dispatch communications, meaning you won't hear clear chatter and more so hear garbled noise. City leaders say the reason comes down to safety. Officials say scanner apps have allowed criminals to monitor officer movements in real time. At the same time, sensitive details like victim names, home addresses, and medical information were being broadcast publicly. With that signal now being locked down, it raises a new question. If someone tries to decrypt it and listen anyway, is that legal? Let's verify. Our sources are Title 18 of the U.S. Code and the Code of Alabama. Here's what we found. Under federal law, listening to an open police scanner has always been legal because the signal was there for anyone to pick up. But encryption changes that completely. Title 18 of the U.S. Code says the only reason listening to police radio is legal is because the signal is readily accessible to the general public. The moment Decatur police encrypts that signal, it is no longer readily accessible, and anyone who tries to decrypt it and listen in is breaking federal law, facing up to 5 years in federal prison. But here in Alabama, the state goes even further. The Code of Alabama says it is illegal to knowingly and intentionally intercept any encrypted public safety communication. That covers police radio, fire dispatch, and 911 traffic. And the penalty is not a slap on the wrist. Police can seize whatever equipment you use on the spot, and a judge can order it destroyed or forfeited to the state. And under Alabama law, this is a Class C felony, which can land someone up to 10 years in state prison. So if someone were to sit in their car in Decatur with a device trying to crack into the police department's new encrypted system, they wouldn't just be breaking one law. They could be charged under both Alabama state law and federal law at the same time. So we can verify that no, it is not legal to decrypt and listen to encrypted police radio.
When you drop your child off at daycare, you trust that whoever is caring for them has been properly screened. But in Alabama, the requirements for daycare workers can look very different depending on where your child is enrolled. So can anyone work at a daycare in Alabama? We verify.
Every day, Alabama parents drop their children off at daycares trusting that the people caring for them are qualified and safe. But are there actually laws in place to make sure of that? Can anyone work at a daycare in Alabama? Let's verify. Our sources are the Alabama Administrative Code, Alabama Code, and the Alabama Department of Human Resources. Here's what we found. In Alabama, daycares fall into two categories, licensed and license exempt. Licensed daycares are regulated by the Alabama Department of Human Resources and must meet the state's minimum standards. License-exempt facilities, which include many church-run daycares, are not required to meet those same standards. So what are the rules at licensed daycares? According to the Alabama Administrative Code, teachers must be at least 18 with a high school diploma or GED, and directors must be at least 19 and meet specific education or training requirements ranging from specialized childcare hours to a degree in early childhood education. All staff must complete pre-service training, including child abuse recognition, shaken baby syndrome prevention, medication administration, CPR, and first aid training. They also must provide a recent doctor's statement confirming they are physically fit and free of infectious disease. And then there's the most critical requirement, the background check. Under Alabama law, every applicant, employee, and volunteer must undergo a criminal history background check through the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency. Facilities must also check the state's child abuse and neglect registry. Certain felony convictions, including crimes against children, violent offenses, or sex-related felonies, permanently disqualify a person from working in a licensed daycare. Now, what about church daycares? This is where many parents may not realize there's a difference. License-exempt church daycares don't have to follow the same education and training rules as licensed centers, and background checks are approached a bit differently. If a church daycare chooses not to run the state background check, the responsibility shifts to the employee, who must request their own. But if a daycare center accepts funds from the state, background checks are required for every employee, no exceptions. So we can verify that no, not just anyone can work at a daycare in Alabama. And parents, no matter where your child is enrolled, you have the right to ask who is caring for your child and what checks have been done.
You hear the words all the time, especially here on the news or social media. Someone has been arrested and they've been released on bond. Or maybe you've heard the term cash bond and wondered, well, isn't that the same thing? What does it mean for someone in jail? Are they the same thing? We verify.
When someone is arrested, they're taken to jail to wait for a judge to set their bond. If you don't know what a bond is, it's a financial guarantee that the person will return to court, not a fine or a punishment. So, are all bonds the same? Let's verify. Our sources are thelegalguide.org, Cornell Law School Legal Information Institute, and the American Bar Association. Here's what we found. If a judge sets a standard bond, for example, $10,000, you usually have options. You can pay the full amount in cash directly to the court, or you can put up property as collateral. Another option is to use a bail bondsman to post bail for you. And if you show up to all your court dates, any cash or collateral you or a bondsman posts is generally returned minus any fees. But what is a bail bondsman? A bail bondsman is a licensed agent who agrees to post the full bond amount on your behalf. This is known as a surety bond. Instead of paying the entire amount to the court, you pay the bondsman a non-refundable fee, typically about 10 to 15% of the total bond. The bondsman then guarantees the full amount to the court, and the defendant is released. But if that person doesn't show up to court, the bondsman can seek to recover the full amount and may use collateral or other legal means to do so. Now, what's the difference between a cash bond and a cash-only bond? While they may sound the same, there is a key difference. A cash bond means the full amount must be paid in cash directly to the court, and sometimes through a bondsman if approved. A cash-only bond means no bondsman is allowed, and the full amount must be paid directly to the court to secure release. Judges typically order cash-only bonds in cases involving high flight risk or serious charges. In cases where someone cannot afford to pay their bond, they remain in jail until their next court date or unless a judge reduces the bond to an amount they can afford. So we can verify that no, not all bonds are the same. Cash bonds and cash-only bonds are not the same thing. In fact, this distinction could be the difference between a night in jail or a month.
If you have something you want us to verify, text us at 256-382-2692.
Water pipes run from large public mains underneath our streets all the way into our homes. But when something goes wrong with those pipes, who picks up the tab? Let's verify. Our sources include the American Water Works Association and the City of Huntsville's website. Here's what we found. According to water industry standards, there are essentially two sections of pipe that bring water to your home. The first is the public water main, the large pipe running beneath your street. That's owned and maintained by your local water utility or municipality. If something goes wrong there, it's on them to fix it at no cost to you. The second section is called the service line. That's the pipe that runs from the water main or the meter all the way to your house. And here's where many homeowners are caught off guard. In most cases, once that pipe crosses your property line, it becomes your responsibility. That means if it cracks, corrodes, or bursts, the repair bill lands in your lap. Those repairs can cost anywhere from $1,000 to upwards of $5,000, depending on the length of the pipe and the extent of the damage. Now, the exact cutoff point between utility responsibility and homeowner responsibility varies by city and county. In some areas, the utility owns up to the meter, and others, responsibility transfers at the property line. Experts recommend contacting your local water utility directly to find out exactly where their responsibility ends and yours begins. If you're a renter, your landlord is generally responsible for the pipes on the property, though you should check your lease to be sure. And if you own your home, it's worth reviewing your homeowner's insurance policy. Many standard policies do not cover service line failures, but additional coverage, sometimes called a service line rider, can be added for a relatively small cost. Some utilities also offer optional protection programs to help homeowners cover unexpected repair costs. So we can verify that your local water utility owns the public main, but in most cases, the service line on your property is your responsibility.
A DeKalb County woman sentenced to life in prison for pushing another woman off a cliff is now asking the court to throw out her guilty plea, and it raises a question. Is a guilty plea the end of the road? Let's verify.
Loretta Carr pleaded guilty earlier this month in connection with the murder of Mary Isbell at Little River Canyon National Preserve. Just 2 weeks later, she filed a motion saying her plea was not voluntary and that her attorneys were incompetent. This sparks the question, can someone actually take back a guilty plea? Let's verify. Our sources are the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure, the American Bar Association, and legal precedent. Here's what we found. Under Rule 11 of the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure, a defendant may ask to withdraw a guilty plea before sentencing, but they must show a fair and just reason. Courts say that can include not understanding the consequences of the plea, being pressured or coerced, getting bad legal advice from their attorney, or new evidence coming to light. After sentencing, it becomes much harder to take back a guilty plea. At that point, a defendant usually has to prove a manifest injustice, meaning something went seriously wrong in the legal process. That could include proof the plea wasn't truly voluntary, proof that they were pressured or misled, evidence that their constitutional rights were violated, or that there was serious misconduct by prosecutors. The American Bar Association also makes clear that before someone pleads guilty, they must be fully informed of their rights, including the right to a jury trial, the right to question witnesses, and the right against self-incrimination. If a judge didn't properly go over those rights in court, that could be a legal reason to ask to withdraw the plea. Immigration consequences are also a factor. Under the Supreme Court's 2010 ruling in Padilla versus Kentucky, defense attorneys are constitutionally required to advise non-citizen clients about deportation risks before they plead guilty. Failure to do so can be considered ineffective assistance of counsel, one of the most common grounds for withdrawing a plea. So we can verify that yes, a defendant does have the right to take back a guilty plea, but it is not guaranteed.
If you've ever looked up and spotted a drone hovering over your home, you may have wondered, is that legal? Tonight, we're taking a closer look at what the law actually says about government drones over your property and whether law enforcement needs a warrant to fly one over your home. Let's verify.
Drones are becoming more and more common in our skies, and so are the questions about who has the right to fly them over your home. So what does the law actually say about government drones over your property? Let's verify. Our sources are the Federal Aviation Administration, the Fourth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, and legal precedent. Here's what we found. According to the FAA, drones are classified as aircraft under federal law. And through the FAA, the federal government controls navigable airspace, which generally begins at 400 feet above ground level. In other words, you don't control unlimited airspace above your house. Officials say your property rights apply to the space just above your home and yard, but not the higher airspace above that. And here's where it gets important. Does law enforcement always need a warrant to fly a drone over your property? Not always. The U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that observations made from public navigable airspace, what any member of the public could see from above, don't automatically require a warrant. In Florida versus Riley, the court held that police flying at 400 feet and observing what is visible to the naked eye do not need a warrant. But that doesn't mean the government can do whatever it wants with a drone over your home. The Fourth Amendment still protects you against unreasonable searches, and courts have made clear those protections can depend on how the drone is being used. That includes how long it's flying, how long it stays over your property, and what kind of technology it's using. If law enforcement uses tools like thermal imaging or powerful zoom cameras to gather details that wouldn't be visible to the naked eye, courts have indicated that kind of surveillance could cross the line into a search and may require a warrant. However, if a government drone is being used for non-surveillance purposes like disaster assessment or infrastructure inspection, that typically falls under broader authority and does not require a warrant. So we can verify that yes, the government can fly a drone over your property in many circumstances, but law enforcement generally needs a warrant for targeted surveillance of your home under the Fourth Amendment.
Data centers are popping up all over North Alabama, and with electric bills seeming higher than ever, some of you are asking a very fair question. Are those massive tech facilities driving up what you pay every month? Is big tech costing you more at home? Let's verify.
North Alabama is becoming one of the fastest growing data center markets in the entire country. Companies like Meta have built multiple facilities right here in the Tennessee Valley, and when your electric bill climbs, it's natural to wonder, is your bill rising because of data centers? Let's verify. Our sources are the Tennessee Valley Authority's website, TVA President and CEO Don Mall, and the Alabama Legislature. Here's what we found. Data centers are attracted to North Alabama largely because of one thing: cheap TVA power, and that demand is growing fast. According to TVA President and CEO Don Mall, data center demand climbed to 18% of TVA's entire industrial load in 2025, and he's projecting that demand to double again by 2030. To keep up, TVA has had to make big decisions, including keeping coal-fired power plants running longer than originally planned. Building and maintaining that generation capacity costs money, and those costs get spread across every ratepayer in the valley, including you. But TVA does not attribute recent rate increases solely to data center growth. In 2024, TVA's board voted at a meeting in Florence to raise wholesale power rates by a 5.25%. That was the largest rate increase in 16 years. Here's where it can hit your bill directly. Local utilities across North Alabama, from Huntsville Utilities to Athens Utilities and to others, receive their power wholesale from TVA. When TVA's wholesale rates go up, your local utility has little choice but to pass some of that along. But the TVA says rate fairness is a top priority, promising that as data centers and AI companies expand, everyday families and local businesses won't see higher electric bills because of that growth. Now, TVA does say rate fairness is a priority, but that's a pledge, not a guarantee. Earlier this month, some Alabama lawmakers introduced what they're calling the Alabama Affordability Protection Plan, legislation aimed at preventing data center growth from increasing costs for everyday ratepayers. But the Alabama Public Service Commission regulates utilities at the state level. It doesn't regulate TVA or the local utilities that receive power from TVA. That means the consumer protections being debated right now in Montgomery would not directly apply to North Alabama households powered by the TVA. So we can verify that no, there is no direct evidence that data centers alone are causing your electric bill to go up. The TVA says it has made rate fairness a priority, pledging to protect everyday families and local businesses as electricity demand continues to grow. When a criminal case is pending, waiting for a judge's decision can feel endless. Whether it's a ruling on a motion, an appeal, or a big legal question like immunity, the delays can stretch for months. So, do judges have time limits to make a ruling in criminal cases? Let's verify. Our sources are the U.S. Constitution, the Alabama Constitution, and the Alabama Rules of Criminal Procedure. Here's what we found. According to the Alabama Rules of Criminal Procedure, trial courts in Alabama have a lot of leeway when it comes to ruling on motions. They're expected to decide without unnecessary delay, but the law doesn't spell out a specific time limit. Appellate courts, like the Alabama Supreme Court, have even more flexibility. While courts may have internal goals for issuing decisions, those aren't enforceable deadlines. Cases can sit under advisement for months or even years without breaking the law. So what protections exist to prevent endless delays? The Sixth Amendment and Alabama's Constitution guarantee the right to a speedy trial, but that protects defendants from unreasonable delays in going to trial, not from how long it takes a judge to issue a ruling. And when delays are caused by the defense, like filing appeals, the courts usually don't count that time against the prosecution. In rare situations, if a delay becomes extreme enough to violate due process, a defendant can file a mandamus petition asking a higher court to order a ruling, but those are rarely granted. In the Mac Marquette case, the Alabama Supreme Court heard oral arguments on his immunity appeal on January 28, 2026. As of now, they have not issued a ruling. There's no deadline forcing them to rule, and the case will remain at a standstill until the justices make their decision, which could take weeks or even months. This kind of delay is actually common in complex criminal appeals, even though it puts the entire prosecution on hold. So we can verify no, there is no time limit requiring judges to make rulings in criminal cases. While courts are expected to act within a reasonable time, what's considered reasonable varies widely, and there are no strict deadlines judges must follow.
Alabama lawmakers have approved a bill that would allow the death penalty for certain violent crimes against children. The measure now heads to Governor Kay Ivey's desk for her signature. But many have asked, what about people already convicted and serving time? Could they face this new punishment? We verify.
The Alabama Senate passed House Bill 41, which would make rape and sodomy of a child under age 12 punishable by death. The bill now heads to Governor Kay Ivey, who has already expressed strong support for the legislation. But many are asking, can this new punishment be applied to people already convicted and serving time in Alabama prisons? Let's verify. Our sources are the U.S. Constitution, the Cornell Legal Information Institute, and the Congressional Research Service Constitution. Here's what we found. The U.S. Constitution has a specific protection against this. Article 1, Section 10 says no state can pass what's called an ex post facto law. In other words, if someone has already been convicted and sentenced, the government cannot go back and increase that punishment later. Back in 1798, the Supreme Court laid out the rules in a case called Calder v. Bull. One important takeaway, punishments can't be increased after a crime has been committed. The Constitution annotated states that in ex post facto cases, the relevant point in time is when the offense was committed, not when someone is sentenced. This means the law that applies is the one in effect at the time the crime was committed. So, if someone was convicted at a time where the maximum sentence was life in prison, they cannot later be resentenced to death just because a new law passes with harsher penalties. What the new Alabama law can do is apply to crimes committed after the law takes effect once Governor Ivey signs it. The constitutional protection applies no matter how serious the crime. So we can verify that no, Alabama's new death penalty bill cannot be applied retroactively to people already convicted and serving time. Whether it's a minor offense or a serious felony, the rule is the same.
Madison County Schools announced they're moving to e-learning tomorrow due to widespread illness. The district is seeing higher than average absences among students and staff, and they're not alone. Many of you at home may be wondering, when exactly is flu season and does it change every year? Let's verify.
If you've noticed more people around you getting sick lately, you're not imagining things. Flu activity is surging across Alabama. So when does flu season actually hit our state, and is the timing different every year? Let's verify. Our sources are the Alabama Department of Public Health and the CDC. Here's what we found. According to the CDC, flu season in Alabama runs from October through May every year. That timing stays consistent year after year. But what months are the peak of the flu season? Nationally, flu activity most often peaks between December and February. Over the past 40 years, flu activity peaked in February 18 times, in December 9 times, and in January 6 times. So while the calendar for flu season stays the same October through May, the exact timing of when it peaks can shift. The CDC also says flu activity this season began increasing in early November and reached its peak in late January to early February, right in line with historical patterns. Now back to Alabama. The Alabama Department of Public Health says respiratory virus cases jumped from about 2% in early December of 2025 to nearly 11% by late December, with the flu accounting for most of those cases. So why does the exact timing change? The CDC explains that the overall health impact of flu varies from season to season. Different influenza viruses circulate each year, and activity levels can increase or decrease at different times depending on which strains are spreading. And if you haven't gotten your flu shot yet, health officials say it's not too late. The Alabama Department of Public Health and the CDC recommend that everyone 6 months and older, with rare exceptions, get a flu vaccination every season. Flu vaccines can reduce flu illnesses, hospitalizations, and deaths. Vaccines are available at Alabama County Health Departments, select retail pharmacy locations, and other providers throughout the state. So we can verify that flu season in Alabama runs October through May every year, but the exact timing of the peak changes, most often hitting between December and February.
You may know that there are strict laws on how prisons must be run to maintain a humane environment for people imprisoned. But what about jails? Do the same laws apply, or are there different standards? Are there any standards? We verify.
It's no secret that Alabama's prisons have long been under scrutiny for inadequate conditions. There's even a documentary about it, The Alabama Solution. But what about our city jails? Are jails held to any state or federal standards? Let's verify. Our source is the Code of Alabama. Here's what we found. The short answer is yes. There are several Alabama laws that mandate what cities must provide for people in jail. These requirements are found primarily in Title 14, Chapter 6 of the Alabama Code. According to Alabama Code 14619, the sheriff of a county jail must provide necessary clothing and bedding, medicine, and medical attention and feminine hygiene products to prisoners at the expense of the county. Section 97 mandates that the sheriff, police chief, or town manager must provide nutritious, clean, wholesome, abundant, and diverse food to all people in jail. Section 93 requires the county commission or city council to provide janitor service, bathing facilities, soap and towels, hot and cold water, clean bedding, and clothes. Section 21 actually makes it illegal for jail officials to allow jails to become foul or unclean. For cities with populations more than 10,000, Section 80 requires the Alabama Department of Corrections to inspect municipal jails at least twice a year to ensure just, humane, and economic management of the facilities. What about visitation rights? A person can be held in a jail for up to a year, but do they have to spend that whole time isolated from the outside world? According to the Alabama Department of Corrections, people in jail have no absolute constitutional right to visitation. However, most Alabama jails allow visitation, but each facility generally has its own policies. For example, the city of Decatur only allows visitors on Sundays from 1 to 3 p.m., and jailed individuals are only allowed one 20-minute visit per week. But what about phone calls? Alabama law requires that once you are under arrest, officers must allow you to make a phone call as soon as possible. But ongoing phone access is not a constitutional right. Jail staff may limit access to the phone if deemed necessary to maintain security. So we can verify that yes, there are state laws mandating what city and county jails must provide to people in jail, but many of these laws include qualifiers like sufficient, adequate, and necessary, which are subjective terms that leave room for each facility to interpret at their own discretion.
Today is National Missing Persons Day, a time to raise awareness about the thousands of people who go missing across the country every year. While most missing persons cases are resolved quickly, some families wait days, months, or even years for answers. You've probably heard that you have to wait 24 hours before you can report someone missing. But is that actually true? Let's verify.
When someone you love goes missing, every minute counts. Waiting a full day to call law enforcement could delay searches, alerts, and crucial investigations. In Alabama, there are special rules for elderly adults, people with dementia or autism, and other vulnerable individuals, making it even more important to know when and how to report. But can you report someone missing right away? Or do you have to wait 24 hours? Let's verify. Our sources are the Code of Alabama and the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency. Here's what we found. According to Aaliyah, when a person goes missing, local law enforcement should be contacted immediately. For vulnerable populations like elderly adults, people with dementia, autism, or other mental or physical disabilities, Section 2619A4 of the Alabama Code allows caregivers to provide statements confirming the individual's condition. This ensures searches and alerts can begin immediately, even if the person cannot advocate for themselves. Officers trained in handling missing persons with these conditions may also be deployed to assist, speeding up the response. But this doesn't mean people not included in vulnerable populations have to wait. According to Section 2619.5, any law enforcement agency receiving a missing person complaint must immediately prepare and send a report to the Alabama Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And in Alabama, anyone, whether it's a family member, friend, or caregiver, can report someone missing. That report should include the person's full legal name, date of birth, and a complete physical description, including height, weight, hair, and eye color. Any distinguishing features like scars, birthmarks, or tattoos. Details about the disappearance, including the last known location and the time they were last seen or heard from. A description of the clothing they were wearing, and if they have a car, its make, model, color, and license plate number, and information about their phone, friends, and known hangouts. Once the report is filed, searches can start and alerts can be issued without delay, giving investigators the best chance to locate your missing loved one. According to Aaliyah, once the report is filed, they will determine whether the situation qualifies for an alert through ACMEC, including Amber Alerts for abducted children, missing and endangered persons alerts for vulnerable individuals, and other alerts. So we can verify that no, you do not have to wait 24 hours to report someone missing in Alabama. Calling right away helps law enforcement respond fast and use every resource to find the person safely.
And if you have something you want us to verify, text us at 256-382-2692.